Now, the degree to which such competition survives has been characterized mostly by Joseph Schumpeter in his description of what he calls destructive competition, and what he means by that is that the competition that arises from new elites arising or new groups arising that replace old groups means that competition is a persistent feature that is continued driving dynamic change. The dynamic change means that you have ongoing changes in organizations, you have ongoing changes in economic, social, and political activity, and this ongoing set of changes characterize and makes for dynamic productivity increase. It is necessary that you have competition in both political and economic markets, because if you only make a competition in one, then there'll be the interest of the other group to develop programs to eliminate competition and to create monopoly rents. And if they're successful in doing that, particularly if they can capture the political system, that will mean that the polity, therefore, will tend to dry up the kind of dynamic process that I'm characterizing. So open access societies sustain a high rate of growth. They're based on impersonal exchange. They're based on a set of property rights and organization and institutions that are open to everybody, that anybody can get access to, that competition is continually driving the process as we go on. And therefore, it's a dynamic, ongoing, changing process. A natural implication, historically anyway, and today still, is that such societies are democratic. They're democratic because literally competition in both political and economic markets guarantees that everybody can get into the act. And indeed, one of the things that's characterized it, and we spend a lot of time in our most recent book talking about it, is that you broadly increase the citizenship characteristics of the society. So instead of just a small number of elites, gradually you bring in other groups become equal partners in the society. And as you do, therefore, you widen both democratic and economic citizenship to include a wider and wider range of the population. Now, I'm going to come back and talk at the end a little bit about some of these things and the degree to which they're still operative today, but I want to move on, because how do you get from a limited access society or a natural state to an open access society? It's obviously not easy and not automatic, as witness the fact that still most of the world today is in a limited access order. And indeed, if you go to a third world country, it doesn't take you very long to observe that. Observe both that there are elites, that there are second-class citizens, and that the privileges that accrue to elite groups are not openly available to other groups in society. Now, obviously, what you observe historically in the last 200 years, particularly in the last 100 years, is a widening of citizenship. To take the case of the United States, you see, first of all, the elimination of slavery in 1863, and the widening of citizenship to a wider percentage of the population that were originally slaves and now become gradually, very gradually, free men and have equal open application of citizenship. That's witness the fact that we today have a president who's black. Or if you want to look at more recent, you look at the evolving position of women in society who got the vote in 1920, but particularly who gradually evolved a degree of equality in economic as well as in political opportunity that characterizes the world we're in. What are the doorstep conditions to get you from limited access to an open access? Well, this is the poorest part of our book in a way, because what we do is describe this. But one of the things that has characterized it, and makes it so difficult to understand, is that every country has evolved differently, has had a different background, has had a different set of institutions and organizations that have evolved, and therefore the way in which each has evolved from, to the degree that they have, from limited access to open access, has differed with each country. So today, if I look as I am today at countries like South Korea or Taiwan that are on the doorstep and evolving into open access societies, the way they are doing it is different than the way Britain, France, Holland, or the United States did it. They're different historically, different experiences, and so on, and that's terribly important for what I'm going to get to. Now, the reason why what we did we think is important is because the policies that the World Bank and others did took you in the wrong direction. I feel very strongly about this, and indeed, so does the World Bank right now, since the World Bank now is supporting or restructuring the whole way in which the World Bank is developing. And in the first week in June, we're presenting a final one of 3 conferences that we've organized on this, that the World Bank is running, to show the way in which existing policies that we used to do didn't work and why they didn't work. Now, I can summarize that briefly, or I'll come back to it. Essentially, the things that make open access societies so dynamic and so impressive is that they provide opportunity through competition for societies to continually evolve and be more productive. And they do that by providing access to anybody to do that. And the result is that they can be very successful. If you apply the principles of open access, well-defined property rights, organizations, institutions freely open to anybody, and all the other characteristics that make for open access, you apply that to a limited access society, what you do, this is important, is you undermine the very structure that made limited access societies work. That is the monopoly privileges that elites had, which make them so they don't kill each other, and provide a set of policies that support limited access society. But if you provide open access and free property rights, you undermine the very structure that made elites and limited access societies work. So what you have to do, and what we're now doing with the World Bank, and indeed is the heart of what we're going to be doing in June with them, is to try to define a program that will show how a limited access society can move from being fragile, which is what they are to begin with, and where you have continuous threats of violence and social order disturbing the system, like the Congo today, for example, to stable structures which evolve more complex institutions and organizations that allow you gradually to become more productive, to create conditions that will allow you to take advantage of new opportunities, and all those things, if you try to impose them directly on a limited access society, are going to undermine stability and not necessarily create the conditions of limited access society, open access society. Now, I say this because, in spite of the fact that the enormous advantages of open access society, in our book we look at per capita income in limited access societies compared to open access societies, and per capita income in limited access societies, it peaks at around $10,000 to $15,000 per capita. In open access societies, they start at about $20,000 to $25,000 and go on up to the $60,000 or $70,000 per capita. There's an enormous difference, in other words, between limited access societies and how they work and open access societies and how they work.